lead in from Janice to Maggie, my dear friend in Ireland, who is all tech, right? And when I met her in the time when I owned my private health studio, and we met through that. We met through, you know, treatment, and she was rocking it then, like way before we were comprehending. And I'm like, what do you do? And she's like, I do this. But she is she's just a leader in the tech industry, period. She has definitely, I know, spoke and talked about women and leadership and business and technology. She has been called upon as a woman leader in technology, as women were breaking into that sector, and we needed someone to, you know, oh my gosh, she can do it, I can do it too. She is a flexible working specialist. She is a mom, and she has two incredible sons. She is coming to us from Ireland, that you will soon hear and figure out for yourself. Her name is Maggie Ahearne, and she is going to talk to us today on building high performance teams. It's just interesting. So it's talking about how Janice is my team in that sector, but how to build high performance teams. The thing that you may not know about her is that she loves to, this is, you know, for those of you that like Mai Tais and beaches, just close your ears, because this woman's favorite is she loves to travel to remote and cold but magical places. Places like Antarctica to see the Arctic animals, and gigging on snow. She's just gigging on snow. So fantastic. Love it. The music she loves is The Cure. Love cats. And someone is going to get an incredible hour to spend virtual lunch, virtual dinner. Who knows, maybe someone in Ireland's going to win this, and have a private session worth over 500 euros. And she is going to gift to everyone who feels like they need to know something as well of what she shares. She's going to give a 15-minute gift to everybody. But so, wow, it is definitely a sisterhood today. So, my dear friend, welcome to the stage.
Thank you. And just amazing to be here and to follow in the footsteps of all the other incredible women who've spoken at the other summits. And amazing to bring Jan in and to talk about joy. It really sort of set the stage for me to be positive and to bring joy to all of you guys. So hopefully I can do a good job of following in Jan's footsteps. So today what I'm going to talk about is having high performing flexible teams. So when we talk about flexible teams, it's kind of an umbrella term for working the way that we want to work. So a very recent survey showed that 79% of people want flexibility around where they work, but 94% of people want flexibility around when they work. And I think over the last few years, we're just not willing to have our time wasted. We want to work the way we want to work. I'm sure a lot of you have, a lot of you have children here, you know that a lot of you have different things going on or other commitments, and that you want to work your day around that. But a lot of companies, a lot of businesses are challenged in having that flexibility, but also being able to hit those goals, exceed those goals, set really high standards. And I know that sometimes those things feel like they're sort of a mismatch. So what I want to talk to you about is some tips and tricks that you can take away, that you can have that flexibility and build those autonomous teams. Sorry, there's the cat. She wanted to say hello. The dog and the children could come in next, so just be prepared. So yeah, we want to hit our goals, we want to exceed our goals, but we also want to offer that flexibility for ourselves, for our teams. So a little bit about my background. As Deb said, I worked in big tech for over 15 years. I guess over the pandemic, at the start of the pandemic, I was just like, I'm done. I'm not willing to sit at a desk 9 to 5 and just burst my ass for some man. I want to work for myself. So I got my MBA during COVID and started working for myself. I also saw the value that the tech companies had around that flexibility and around building autonomous teams that could be shared with other companies, with small organizations who were really, really struggling when everyone was working from home, but also with companies in different sectors. So that's what I started doing about 3.5 years ago now, and I'm working with a lot of companies on really supporting them with that area. And also, when we think about flexibility, there's a lot of different industries that can't have remote working. So if you're in the services industry, if you're in retail, if you're in different industries like that, it doesn't necessarily work for you to be sitting at home. But how can we create that autonomy with our team members and with ourselves that we can still provide the best service possible? So, in terms of flexible working and why it's worked for me, um, so as Deb said, I was over in Vancouver. I was over in Vancouver for about 10 years with my husband. Few times I nearly went home, and actually, Deb was such a great support to me. And, having her there for me over the 10 years I was there was amazing. And I've gotten to see her over in Ireland as well. So it's just been great. And it's great to have that friendship with Deb and that support. But why flexibility has worked for me, when we first decided that we wanted to move back to Ireland, we had two kids over in Canada, wanted to come back and be closer to family. But we really felt like we were either going to have to sacrifice the family life that we were looking for, which was being closer to our family in smaller cities, and have to move to one of the bigger cities, or else we were going to have to sacrifice our career. So we were going to have to move back to the smaller place and get sort of a lower paid job or a job in a sector that maybe wasn't sort of on our road. So I was very lucky at the time. I was working for Expedia cruise ship centers in Vancouver. Some of you might be familiar with them. And I had the most amazing supportive boss at the time who said to me, you know what, if you can make it work, we can make it work. So I moved back, was working for them, had an amazing 10 years working with them. And also in terms of flexibility, I know that Jan was talking about competitive swimming. So my older son actually swims very competitively, and I'm sure Jan, you're familiar with this. He trains at 5:30 in the morning, 5 or 6 days a week. So 5:30 in the morning till 7:30 in the morning, the days that he's swimming are some of the most productive times that I have. So if I had to be sitting at a desk from 9 to 5 and not have that flexibility, it would be very frustrating for me. So, what I'm going to talk to you about today is I'm going to touch on a few different areas. And I always say to people, like, if you can just take away one thing from this, then I think it's really valuable. And even if it's something that you're aware of or something that you've done before, you might go away and say, okay, I'm going to try that. Um, I could talk about a million things. I could talk all day. So it was hard for me to condense this down. So what I want to talk about first is engagement. So when we talk about engagement, we talk about maybe you've hired someone, you've brought them on board, you've done a really good job hiring, you've done a good job of onboarding. I know onboarding is such a difficult area when you have remote and flexible teams. So if you do want to book that 15 minutes with me, or you get that hour with me and you want to talk about that, let's chat about that. But we've done a good job of that, and now the new team member, our team member, is engaged. They feel committed to the job. They feel committed to the company. They're thinking, this is the type of place that I want to work, and I'm really happy with my choice. The next level up then is motivation. So I'm engaged, I'm committed, but we want to get them motivated. So we want them to say, I want to do my best. I want to reach the stars. I want to hit these goals. I want to exceed these goals. So we want to look at engagement. We're going to look at motivation. We're then going to tie this into setting goals. What we want to move away from when we do have flexible teams or flexible arrangements is, things being in your head, things being written on a piece of paper, things being based on anecdotes. You want things to be very specific. You want to set your goals, and then you want to tie it all together through your performance management. So you're looking at that engagement piece. People are committed. They want to be there. You want to look at your motivation. They want to reach the stars. You want to have your goals set, and then you can tie that all in with your performance. So I'm going to talk about engagement first. I think it's so easy. And actually, let me take a step back. Talking to a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of managers, a lot of companies, they're really challenged with this engagement piece now at the moment, with since the pandemic, and they didn't have the foundations laid to be able to support these. So they find that people aren't engaged. People are bored, people are challenged. Um, but it can often be our default to think that if somebody isn't engaged, they're not sort of, they just feel like they've kind of checked out. People can often assume that they're lazy, they're at home, they're watching TV when they're supposed to be working, they're out looking for another job. But it's not the only reason that people aren't engaged. One of the biggest areas I see around lack of engagement is if people feel like their time is being wasted. I've gone into so many teams where I've looked at the first thing I always say to a team is, let me look at your schedule, your meeting schedule. They open up their schedule, they're like, oh, yeah, 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 we're back to back meetings. I was in one team and they used to have every day, they had 5 hours of back to back meetings with 40 people in those meetings. People were absolutely, they were bored. They felt like their time was being wasted. They weren't contributing because there's only the same 3 or 4 people that were contributing in those meetings. And if your team members feel like they don't want to contribute because you're wasting their time, that's where you're losing creativity, you're losing innovation, you're losing really good ideas. So what I always say to teams and I always say to managers is look at that schedule, look at every single regular meeting you have for maybe a 2 week period. Look at how long the meeting is. Does it need to be that long? Look at who's invited to the meeting and then look at who's contributing in the meeting. If there's only 3 or 4 people contributing, but there's 15 people in the meeting, then why is there 15 people in the meeting? And look at the agendas. Every meeting should have an agenda. It should have a structured agenda, and it's just lazy not to have that. So go in and look at that and make sure that you are creating that agenda. Don't have a meeting for the sake of a meeting. One team I was working with, they had a planning meeting and then they had a pre-planning meeting for the planning meeting. And like I'm not joking. It's just incredible that a company would do that. So show your team that you value their time, you value their input, and don't waste their time. Don't be inviting them to things that they don't do. So I would invite everybody to do that. Go back and look at the meetings that you have on your schedule and see if there's any that you can remove. And then the last one, which is a trickier one, is personal issues. Um, if we're all in the office 9 to 5, we're all sitting beside each other, it's very easy to know if somebody has something personal going on in their life. You know, whatever reason they could be, they could have childcare issues, they could be looking after an elderly parent, lots of different things are going on. But if somebody is at home, they're working independently, you don't see them, you're only chatting to them on Zooms every now and again, it can be very hard to know if they have a personal issue if you haven't invested in building a trusting relationship with that person. Um, and like once you know that someone has a personal issue, it's something that you can help them with there and then, and you can make allowances for them, and the team can support them. Um, so what I would say then around just that area of engagement. So we've sort of 3 buckets of challenges with engagement. We have that area where people aren't motivated, and I'm going to go to motivation next. Then we have this piece around afraid to speak up. They're not speaking up. People aren't going to speak up. And then there's the other one around personal issues. So what I would suggest to you as an entrepreneur, as a manager, as somebody who's working with different people, is look at ways that you can improve the communication. So having an agenda for catch-ups. Don't just have a one-on-one meeting with your team members just for the sake of it. Have a structured agenda. I met with one group and I loved it. They had basically every manager had um, a one-on-one with their team members every 2 weeks. But one of the weeks they focused on quarterly goals, and the other one they focused on general ambitions, longer term plans, those kind of things. But you need to allow the person within the team to lead that. It's not manager led, it's an opportunity, it's a safe space for that person to talk to you, to share with you, and to give their feedback. I worked for one company and used to have a one-on-one with my manager every week. I wouldn't sleep the night before because every every one-on-one, the first half of it, he'd talk about how great he was and just tell me how amazing he was. And then the second half of the one-on-one, he just yell at everything that was going wrong on the team, on the projects. And it was just a really, really horrible experience. So by the time that I quit that job, I wasn't telling him why I was quitting it. I wasn't sharing anything with him. So it was totally left field for him. He had no idea I was going to quit, whereas I thought it was really obvious for a few months. So building trust, and also, whether you have, two people working on your team, 5 people, 10 people, whatever it is, do send surveys to your team on a regular basis. It could be once a year where you're asking for feedback. If the team is big enough, it can be anonymous, that's great, but ask them for feedback. Create a space where feedback is welcomed and feedback is going to be actioned upon. There's going to be areas where you're not going to be able to do anything about it, but acknowledge it and then tell them, either what something that you can't action on or how you're going to make steps to improve that. Like I know for one example is, people might come and say, oh, well, I wasn't really happy with the bonus I got at Christmas. And then you can go back to them and say, listen, the bonus wasn't as good this year because, we didn't hit these targets and we weren't able to do it. And then people understand and you can say to them, maybe next year if we can, if we can improve things, then it'll be better. But just having that and being that people feel like you're hearing them and you're listening to them. So that's engagement. I'm going to talk about motivation now. So everybody in this room, I would say, highly motivated, very driven, and it can be very easy for us to assume, when we're just like, I just want to go to I want to go to the top. It can be very easy for us to assume that everybody wants to do that. Okay, yeah, you want to go, you want to be a VP, a CEO, you want to be all these things. But we have to listen again. We have to hear, we have to understand what motivates people. And there's sort of 3 areas that I would see around this piece, around motivation, what motivates people to do a good job, what motivates people to do a really good job. The first one is job rotation. So I'm working in an admin role, and maybe I want to move into recruitment. So, you've heard that, you've listened to that. You can say to them, we don't have any opportunities in recruitment at the moment, and you don't have the skills to do that. But what I'm going to do is, on top of your current role, if this is something that you're really interested in, I'll give you opportunity to gain some of those skills. So maybe you'll say to them, okay, well, on top of your current role, you can also maybe review resumes, you can schedule interviews, different things like that. But you're listening to them and you're saying to them, I'm going to give you the skills so that if an opportunity comes up in that area of the business, I've helped you achieve those goals. The next one is that, obvious sort of moving up the ladder. So I call it job enrichment. It is, I want more responsibility. I want to manage teams. But again, don't just assume that people want to do that. I working in tech for years. I've worked with a lot of really good programmers. I've seen in so many companies where, this programmer is doing an amazing job, and suddenly that person is promoted to manager because they're doing such a good job. Number one, they haven't been given any of the skills to be able to step into that managerial position or that lead position. And number two, it's something that they don't want to do. So what ends up happening is they don't succeed in that role and they either leave the company or they get demoted. And then, like, there's nothing more demotivating than demoting somebody. So if someone does express an interest in moving up, well, how can you give them responsibilities that are at that next level, the level that they want to move to? How can you give them responsibilities so that when they do move to that level, they already have some of those skills in their tool belt? So, and then it comes to our performance evaluation at the end of the year, and we can say, okay, well, we've given you some responsibilities. A new person joined the team, and you've been kind of a mentor to them. And you can either say, yeah, you've done such a good job at that. Now we are going to promote you, or you can say, okay, well, there's areas here where I think we need to do a little bit more work. So let's look at doing that. So that's what I would say to you if somebody is motivated by moving up the ladder. And then the other one is, this programmer who loves their job. They don't want to go up the ladder. They don't want to move into a different role. They want to keep doing what they're doing. They really love their job. They're really satisfied doing that job. So how can I be really thoughtful about, as a manager, giving them extra responsibilities um, that keep them motivated? How can I bring them into meetings where I'm going to get their opinion on things? How can I give them more complex projects, more complex things to do, and constantly, looking at ways that you can support them. But what I would say to you, so those are the sort of the three areas about motivation. Listen, hear, don't assume. And I think, when we think about flexible working as well, we have to listen to what people want. It's different for everybody, and it's different for people at different stages of their life as well. So listening, hearing, don't have all the answers to all the problems that you don't even know exist yet. Listen to people, ask them where are they challenged? What are their struggles? What are they seeing as a problem? And asking for their opinion. How do you think we can help with that? I've done some work with the 4-day week global. And basically what the 4-day week global promotes is 100% outcome, 100% pay, and 80% time. But one of the big things that they promote when they work with companies is, you know, don't go in with all the answers. Go into people and say, how do you think this would work? They're working with teams like retail, they're working with service industry, ask them how it would work for them. And it's amazing then the ideas that people come with. Um, so in terms of that, we have our engagement. We've focused on that. We've worked on that with our team, with the people that we're working with. We're working on the motivation piece. And then how do we look at that in terms of the goals? When we look at flexible teams, autonomous teams, we are thinking about it being very goal based, being able to measure it, being able to set timelines to it. So the first thing I would say to you from a practical perspective is look at what your organization or your company's goals are. Generally, most companies are looking at their annual goals between September and December. They're kind of planning, okay, well, what do we want to focus on over the next year? They're probably looking at maybe, 3 to 5 goals that they want to really focus on over the next year. So it's important then, if you do want to look at this flexible piece, is that everything that your team is working on in the following year should align to those goals in one way or the other. If somebody's working on something and it doesn't align to those at all, then it's an opportunity to kind of say, okay, well, why are we doing this? Ask those questions. I work with one company in the healthcare space, and one of their goals for 2024 is really to focus on the healthcare professional. They have a product that supports healthcare professionals and patients. So if somebody comes, and it happened a few weeks ago, someone came and said, I have this really good idea for our patients. But we were able to go back and say, okay, our focus this year is on healthcare professionals. That's a really good idea and it's a really good suggestion, but it doesn't align to what we're working on this year. So let's just park it for this year and maybe we'll revisit it next year. So like say if we had an organization who they wanted to increase revenue by a certain percentage, then what I would say is, whether it's one team you have in your company or you have multiple teams, then you're looking at opportunities to be more specific in their quarterly goals. So I always say, my recommendation is you set your organization's goals annually. Those are quite high level. From a team basis, then you're looking at them on more of a quarterly basis. And, it's important at that point when you're looking at the quarterly basis that your different teams within your organization, now you mightn't have multiple teams, but if you do have multiple teams, that you're looking and you're matching those up. So you're looking at, okay, team A is working on this, maybe they're looking at, say if it's a nonprofit, they're looking at increasing repeat donations. You might have another team who's working on increasing online donations. So there's sort of different things, but it's important that you're looking at that together as a team within your managerial team on a quarterly basis so that you can see if there's anything that's going to overlap. And you can also see if, you might have one team, it might be your um, your marketing team, and they're focused on something that's really going to need support from your sales team. So having that conversation on a quarterly basis doesn't mean that, two teams are just like separately running down these tracks and then 9 months later everything crashes because you weren't aligned on that. Then on an individual basis, you're looking at how can the work that the individuals within each team are doing, how do they align to the team? You're looking at those as a team probably every 2 weeks. So your team is looking at very specific things every 2 weeks. Your teams are looking at things every quarter, and then your organization is looking at things every year. And by doing that, like what I like doing is, you create, every team has to create, or every manager has to create a very high level 1-page memo every quarter saying, this is what we're working on, this is what the individuals are focused on. And a lot of things that I find around flexible teams or remote teams, companies say to me, oh, I don't know how to work between the different generations, or, I can't get people to forge genuine relationships. If people are focused on the same areas, and you're having these regular meetings where you're understanding what the other people in your team are working on, how that goes up to the team, how that goes up to the organization, that ties people together in a much more meaningful way, because they see how the work that they're doing is meaningful. They see how the work that their colleagues are doing is meaningful, and it sort of does build that up. So I would really advise that. Um, and like that, I know that's very rushed, and there's a lot in that. So, feel free to set up that 15 minutes with me. And really then, like, looking at that, we can tie that all to our performance management. So again, instead of it being anecdotal, you're clear on goals, you're clear on what motivates people, you're clear on like whether they're engaged or not. And then you can look at the end of the year, you can say, okay, well, we set this goal, we set this team goal last quarter, or we set this team goal a year ago, and this is how you contributed to that, or this is where you weren't able to contribute to that. So this is an area that we need to work on. So you want it to be very factual, you want it to be data-based, and you want to kind of step away from that anecdotal thing. I worked with a really large company a couple of years ago. They were working on this huge, big technical transformation project, but they didn't invest in setting those like data-driven goals at the start. And then it became a case of one senior manager against another senior manager. And it was like, your team did this, your team did that. And it all became very anecdotal. So it became very challenging. So I would definitely say to you that that's a really good way to motivate people and to support your team. Um, I could talk about this forever, but I should really stop because there's other speakers here today. And I hope that you all understood my accent and that I didn't speak way too fast. I hope I didn't need subtitles there.
No, that was absolutely fantastic.